Okay, so we're going to call this meeting to order at 6:02. We need to review and accept the agenda. Anyone want to make a motion?
Yes, I'll make that motion. To accept the agenda, or review it and accept it.
Take it a second.
Derek's hand is up.
Okay, Derek, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any additions or subtractions? I don't know of any.
I don't have any.
Okay. Hearing none, all those that approve the agenda as stated, please press your little green button or press the red button if you don't like it.
I have no idea how Greg is standing on his head.
I don't know.
I was going to say something, but Lori was talking.
And he's very green.
Okay.
I have Rebecca, Bonnie, and Barry, Barbara.
Need Bill, Derek. Derek, are you okay with the agenda?
Derek, we can't hear you.
Oh,
okay.
He's good. All right, Derek's good.
Bill?
Greg and
Yeah.
Bill.
So
Okay.
if Greg holds up his thumb, is he saying
looks like
yes
a no.
or no?
I'm good.
Oh. All right, and then Bill, are you okay with this?
Yes.
Great. All right, so we've got an approval of the agenda because everyone agreed. Thank you for that. Communications with parents, citizens, and staff. I have not received any notification for the board from any of those groups. So how about you, Jean? Anything you want to tell us?
I received lots of emails, but not directed to the board. Mostly
Okay.
parents with questions, and Let's Talk is hopping these days.
Great. Okay, good. All right, so then we're moving on. Board professional development.
Hold on a second. Any themes in Let's Talk that
Well, it's the general themes. It's mostly questions, or I didn't get the packet. Who do I contact? Or I want to order meals for my child. It's mostly a who do I contact kind of question. We've kind of moved beyond the I don't like your plan to how are we going to make this work?
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so we are going to move on to our policy rehearsal, which is about the Otter Valley policies. I hope everybody has their copy or has them online. What we're doing tonight is we're reviewing our policies for common understanding. And so I did send you guys out an email last night. I apologize for the lateness of it. But it is going to break us out into groups to discuss each policy and then come back and come up with a consensus of what each policy stands for. But what I would like to do here at the beginning is kind of just explain how we ended up as a policy governance board. And so I'll admit, when I joined the Sudbury School Board 10 years ago, it's been a long time, and then we became the OVUU board, I swore that I would never do policy governance because it would take away all of my rights as a board member and leave everything in the superintendent's hands. And then I went to a training up in Randolph, Rochester, somewhere up there, and saw Miriam Carver, who with her husband actually drafted what policy governance looks like. And ever since then, I've just thought it's wonderful because it allows us as a board to do our job and it allows the superintendent to do hers or his if we had a male superintendent. What I would like to say is that each policy is purposely written. It allows essentially what you would call buckets. The first policy is the largest bucket. It tells us what we want for our kids. And then the other ones are kind of different bowls within that tells the executive limitations, talks about what the superintendent can and cannot do. And then the third and fourth policy is about what the board can and cannot do, mostly about governance process and about the board superintendent delegation. So we also have the ability that, and we'll be doing this later on also tonight as we get a monitoring report interpretation from Jean, we have the ability, if we do not like the way that she's either interpreted a policy or the evidence that she provides, we have the ability to change the policy so that it wraps around what we think that should do. So at this point, we as a board get to determine what those policies are. If somebody wants to change one, of course, the board has to come to a consensus about that. And we, as the board, are responsible for setting the vision and connecting to the community. So, having said that, are there any questions from any of you? Allison Popa is with us tonight. Yes, Becky.
I just wanted to add a couple things to your description, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first is, if you can imagine a set of mixing bowls, and the first mixing bowl is like our first policy, our ends, and then each mixing bowl you add in says, and this is how you'll do it, and it adds more clarity and less room for, I don't want to say Jean, but the superintendent's office, well, yeah, Jean, who have, I don't want to say wiggle room because it's not right, but it's like, here's the limit. And if we don't like that, then we add another nesting bowl, and we keep adding the nesting bowls until we think we have enough. The other thing I will say is, just like Lori, I've been on the school board for 16 and a half years. And when I first got on, I have to say, we did a lot of, at least in Rutland Northeast, what I can remember is a lot of like, we want cameras and this is where they're going to go. And we thought what we were doing was controlling and not controlling, but like being in charge. And what I realized after going to some trainings was actually we were less in charge by doing it that way. And we're more in charge in policy governance, because what we're saying is, okay, you can have the video cameras and we're giving you, here's the limitations, but you decide on how. So we get to look at that bigger picture of, do we need them? Not her telling us that we need them and then we tell her where they go. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Anybody else?
I wanted to also add, Lori, because obviously coming into this, I didn't really understand policy governance either. So I had quite a bit of conversation with Jean and with you, Lori, just to have a better understanding coming into this discussion. And the reason that we're sort of having this discussion is because, at the retreat, at the board retreat, there is definitely sort of an opportunity to have a better understanding about policy governance and what that means. And so I guess one thing I found to be very helpful was the idea of reasonable versus unreasonable. It sort of takes that black and white out of, the policies sort of take that black and white decision making out of it. And I was hoping either Jean or Lori could expand on that concept a little bit, because I felt that to be very useful in having a better understanding of policy governance as a whole.
Lori, it's your call.
I'll let you do it.
Okay. So when you write a policy, it is up to me to interpret that policy. And this kind of goes back to what Becky was saying. So if you write a policy and I interpret it, and that's what I'm bringing you tonight in my monitoring report is my interpretation. The question you need to ask yourself is that a reasonable interpretation? Not do you individually agree with it, but is it a reasonable interpretation? Because I can't possibly guess the minds of 13 different people, especially when some of those people change every year. So is it a reasonable interpretation? If the answer is yes, then the next question you ask yourself, as a board as a whole, is it the interpretation that the board intended to reach? because maybe it's a reasonable interpretation, but it's down an entirely different path than you intended. If it is down an entirely different path, then the board, like Becky said, adds on another layer to tighten that policy so that the reasonable interpretation is heading the direction you want it to go. And then the next time I bring you a report on that, the next month, whatever, and I would be privy to that conversation, then I would reasonably interpret your tightened policy. And again, you would ask yourself, is that a reasonable interpretation? And is it the direction that we wanted to go? And once there's agreement on the reasonable interpretation, then I have to provide evidence that I have actually met that interpretation. But that reasonable interpretation piece it's hugely important, because at any time, it shouldn't be the superintendent guessing what the board meant. The policy should be clear enough that a reasonable interpretation achieves what it is the board wants to achieve. And if it's not clear enough for that, then the board should look at the wording of the policy and see where you might want to make it clearer so that whomever you have working for you is going in that direction.
How long has policy governance been in effect?
How long has it been around?
Yes, in Rutland Northeast.
Oh, in Rutland Northeast. You merged in, when did we merge? 2000, gosh, 17? 6? I don't even know.
So our policies were adopted on December 19th of 2018.
That's helpful. And you had studied them for a year and a half prior to adopting them.
Yes.
So you started exploring them in the 17-18 school year. Becky had gone to a training with some Barstow board members in Atlanta, and then Miriam Carver came here, and several of you went to that training in Randolph that Lori mentioned. And then Val Gardner had done some work with the board before you ever, so it was a year and a half before you ever adopted the process.
Okay, what has been accomplished on the process? Whether it's I look at the book and I read it, and there's a whole lot of process. But then I ask myself, what has the board accomplished as a result?
Not sure if I heard the question. What has the board accomplished
Yes.
under
Yeah,
policy
what-
governance or with policy governance?
How far have we gotten with policy governance since we started in 2018? I think is what he's asking.
How far have we gone with it?
Yeah. How much how many policies have we
So
adopted, and how
okay.
far into it are we?
You're completely in it. So once you voted, once you designed your policies, which is that set that you have, and I don't see Nikki on the call, but I hope we got her written copy. Once you adopted that, then you started to live by it. And many times over the last couple of years, when something would come up, you would pull out the policies and say, where does it fit in there? And that's what actually should be happening as ongoing board development, is you should be so familiar with those policies that if anything comes up, COVID or anything, that you should be able to look right at the policies and say, where does it speak to this in here? It's not going to speak to the situation, but it's going to tell you where are the superintendent's limits on what they can do in this. And you have done that, gosh, Becky, I'm looking at you, Angela, you have done that many times over the last couple of years.
Can you give me an example or examples?
An example of when you've done it?
And we've looked over the policy.
I think COVID-19 is a perfect example of when we've done it.
Well, last May, you asked, that is, although it's not the greatest of examples, but last May, you asked me to look at all the policies under the lens of COVID-19 and tell me if there are any changes to the interpretations I had made. And I provided a report to you specifically on that. But an example might be, I don't know, as you know, Bill, I have multiple boards. So I'll give you an example that existed in my career here, but I won't say if it was Otter Valley or not. So an example is a residency question and a parent who wants school choice. And that's something that maybe at one time might have gone to the board, But the reality is your policy tells me that I have to live within the laws, and there are laws around residency and laws around school choice. So it doesn't need to go to the board. I need to follow your policies on it. I need to follow the law. I need to follow the school choice rules. Something that I might have brought up to you, I have an example of, mostly I'm thinking of examples.
Jean, I can think of a time when somebody brought home files or something like that and they weren't supposed to.
Right.
And so we were able to look back at that policy under the, you know, it was like the treatment of whatever one that was.
Confidentiality was
and
under
say, no,
treatment of
that's not
students and staff.
right. That's not right. And so then, you know, what does that look like? And what are we going to do to tighten that up so we know that that won't happen again?
And then you turned to me and you said, you need to come back with a plan for that.
Yes.
And then I did. The next meeting, I had provided to you a plan and then told you what the timeline of that plan was. And then I also provided to you when that plan was fully implemented.
And that's the good thing about the policy governance is before we actually didn't know as much because Jean now has to report different times of the year, different policies, and she has to very specifically say, here's how I did that. And that's how we got the report
Right.
about somebody had brought home the paperwork. And that might not have been something that we would have known about before, but because it's so tight. And then, you know, Jean had to say, this is what happened and here's how it's going to change.
Because I was out of compliance with the policy you had set. Do you want to jump in and?
Yeah, so I think at this point, I sent you guys out an email, as I had mentioned before, and it indicated that I was breaking you guys into groups. And so what Jean is going to do for us is she is going to pop you all into your own little Zoom meeting by group. And what you will do is look at the policy, the overarching policy, try to stay out of the ones that are underneath because all of the stuff underneath of it is to support the main goal of 1.0 or 2.0. Though you can look at those other ones like 2.3.1 or 2.3 as a additional nesting bowl, if you will, for executive limitations. Yep.
I was going to ask this earlier. During the year and a half that the board was looking at this, was there a draft that you were presented? And where's the origins of the document? I'm assuming that we didn't write it from scratch.
Right. There is the policy governance gurus did, Miriam and John Carver, they do provide a draft, and then the board had to walk through each and every one and personalize it to what the board wanted it to say. So if you pick up any books on policy governance, you'll see similar but not the same policies. Even Otter Valley and Barstow are not and RNESU are not exactly the same because you personalize it to make sure it captures what you want. But there is a kind of a template to work from.
Okay.
Because the whole structure is 1.0 policies, which is the global ends, and 2.0, which is the executive limitations. Those are in the realm of the superintendent to follow. 3.0, which is the board superintendent delegation, and 4.0, which is how the board governs itself. Those are thoroughly in the board's backyard to follow. So that's how the whole thing is set up. It's a clear delineation of what is the superintendent's responsibility and what are the boundaries of that responsibility, and that's 1.0 and 2.0. And then what is the board's responsibility and clear processes. So that's in 3 and 4.
Thanks.
And the way the breakout rooms work is, well, first of all, Bonnie C, I'm going to ask if you'd mind going with Barbara to 4.0 because Bonnie B isn't here. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Thanks. So I'm going to send you off to your rooms, and I'll kind of watch the clock and give you an idea of when to come back. If you do nothing, you're shot back here. If you do nothing, you're shot into your room. if you want to come back early, you'll have something on the screen that says leave room, and you'll end up back in this main room. So if you haven't been in a Zoom breakout room before, it's a little Star Trek-ish, but all your molecules will remain intact, I promise.
And can I add one thing to that, Jean? So the purpose of I know it was in the email too, I believe, but it's really for you guys to discuss what that policy means. The policies are there and they're very useful. It is helpful to have that conversation to really sort of drill down a little bit and say in your own words what what that means to you guys as a group, to be able to have that discussion. And the purpose is really to get everybody up to speed, and sort of on the same page about what these policies are and what they mean,
Okay.
As a whole.
Okay.
Coming up, trying to, so each group should go and kind of give us what your common understanding was for your policy. So do we want to start with the people from policy 1, which was
Global ends, which was,
was Greg. Was that Greg and Angela?
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg, you want to take it or you want me to do it?
You can go ahead.
Not really. So our interpretation, I mean, Greg says it better than I do, but I'll fumble through it. My view of the global ends is just, what do we want our students to be or to act or whatever? What do we want from our seniors graduating with a diploma from Otter Valley? And these are the items that we wanted. We could have, as Greg said, we could have just left it at 1.0, but we decided as a board that we wanted it to be more specific. So we put that we wanted them to be life learners, academic proficiencies, and citizenships, and social and emotional and personal development. So we wanted to go further into what we want from our seniors. So that's pretty much me in the nutshell. Do you want to add to that, Greg?
No, you voiced at least the way I remember us writing those. And we took a while deciding what the 1.1, 2, and 3, and 4 would be, and what they would say. And some of it, we wrote sentences underneath to explain a little bit more. And it just gives the superintendent a little more information of what we expect the more we write there. We don't want to write too much, but we wanted to add those things in particular. So I don't know, has everybody here read at least what 1.1 is, what our end goal for students is? So. Any questions?
One observation is the list of outcomes is pretty universal, and there's a lot of lists that are like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I know that was, when we were writing it, it did feel strange. We're like, well, doesn't everybody have the same global ends for their kids? How do we make this specific and, to us and, what we put in there? And it's tough because, yeah, there's a universality about schooling, but then, there's nuances in different communities, what words trigger certain things. So I don't know how else to phrase it.
I was just going to discuss the process for anybody who wanted to know what that was.
Okay, so anybody else have any questions for Angela and Greg, or do you feel that you have any different opinions about 1.0?
Yes.
Yeah, Derek, sorry, go ahead.
I guess it's, again, just an observation that this is the global ends for the unified union, and that's it's a new organization. It's a new operational animal. And so this is a way of articulating, in a global sense, why it exists and what it is. And we've had to go forward from, several years ago when we've created these policies to help this new organization. And so we're a new unified board that exists in a new way that includes all of these communities that used to have separate boards. So we're in a bigger 3,000-foot view than each individual school. I think so. It's just a note that I wanted to make on that globalness.
Okay, great. Yep, that's true. We are. This creates one universal district for everybody that we all fall into, and so that equity hopefully will happen throughout that.
Just a quick question on this.
Sure.
For the people who worked on Area 1, there isn't anything that says the student or the graduate shouldn't be a jerk.
Well, we were trying to be nice.
Yeah.
Well, no. But it doesn't say that, but it's incredibly important.
In citizenship, it's kind of saying, please don't, well, not citizenship, social and emotional, like you can put it in a few of those. You could take it out to say not to be a jerk.
1.4.
Yeah, citizenship is where I was starting.
I'll look at that.
And 1.0, successful and contributing citizens.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't be successful in contributing if you're an ass.
And moving on from there, now that we've said that, we are going to move on to policy 2.0, which was Kevin, myself, and Becky. And Becky, you did most of the talking, so I'll let you keep going.
Well, really what we did was we read it and really thought about what number 2 means is we're going to let Jean do her job, but she can't do it in an unlawful, unsafe, imprudent way. And so, I don't know, I think we tried to go over some examples and think about how we use that policy in a way that we can monitor things more closely than we used to. I don't know, Kevin, what do you think? What do you want to add?
Oh, I had some concerns about, I'm going to scroll down, sorry, read it here. The last phrase, the superintendent won't allow violation of commonly accepted educational ethics and practices, and if we just drop the ethics, I think it leaves room for a superintendent to clamp down on innovative teaching. If a commonly accepted practice is, innovation by definition isn't commonly accepted yet. So I had some worries about that. If it might be a template to enforce conformity on teachers.
Can you tell me what number that is?
That's 2.0.
2.0.
After the last comma.
Say it again.
I'm sorry?
Could you say that again? I'm looking at 2.0.
Okay, so I'm looking at the last, from the last comma, superintendent shall not allow, cause or allow, and then the last comma, anything that's in violation of commonly accepted educational practices. Ethics, I'm leaving aside for so
I think what you're saying is that if it's something that's not commonly accepted, but it's a teacher that's a good teacher and they're thinking outside the box, does it leave the next superintendent, does it allow the next superintendent to say, no, you can't do that because it's not a commonly acceptable education practice? Is that what you're saying, Kevin?
Yes.
It's a good example of where, when I bring you an interpretation of that particular one, how am I interpreting commonly accepted educational professional ethics and practices? So when you receive that particular report, then, you know, how is that interpreted? And that would be where you'd say, is that a reasonable interpretation? And therefore, is your wording tight enough?
Right, and we talked about that. So we talked about what's the interpretation and how we use the one that you just put in, Jean, as an example of looking at each of the things and saying, okay, this is how Jean interprets it. So then do we accept that or not? And if not, now is the time to say, no, that's not what we mean by that. And it's always just remembering that, you know, you can't do anything that's unlawful, unsafe, or imprudent. And it has to be ethical. So that's what that's saying.
But how, I guess the question that Kevin might be asking too is how do we ensure that innovative practices don't get blocked?
And I would respond to that first you have to look at what the superintendent's reasonable interpretation is. Mm-hmm. That's where you will know whether or not the superintendent is interpreting that nobody can do anything new, innovative. Is that her interpretation? Or is it what is the superintendent's interpretation? That's how you know if it's worded well or not.
So well, it was never really a problem.
No, but in the future, I think Kevin was saying, what about in a different superintendent in the future interpreting that? It would behoove us to take our role as monitoring those reports and examining those interpretations to make sure that innovation was allowed and encouraged, perhaps.
Right, and you could either build that into that section, or you could even write another 2-point something around encouraging innovation and progressive thinking, or whatever you'd like, you know.
Another nesting bowl.
Right.
Perfect. Anything else that anybody would like to comment about on 2.0? Executive limitations. Okay, not seeing anything, so we're going to move on to 3.0, which is where we start looking at the stuff that we're responsible for, which is board delegation, I believe it is. And that was Derek and Barry and Bill, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so whoever wants to talk, go for it.
I'll let you guys lead.
Yeah. Well, it was it's a one sentence global statement that encompasses a huge concept. But I think the essence of it is that you have two significant entities. On the one hand, the school board, which has responsibilities for developing policies and connecting with the community. And then on the other hand, you have the operational organization, which is the schools plural, and the issues around achievements with curriculum and performance and safety, and then conduct within that operational organization around decisions and procedures and practices. And the question is, what's the connection between the two, the board and the operational organization? And this policy 3.0 states that it's the sole connection, and the sole official connection says that it will be through the superintendent. I point out the word will, which in language, legal and contractual and otherwise, is one of the most powerful words you can use. So there's an emphasis there that the superintendent is the connection, and that the board's policies and efforts through the superintendent have an effect and an impact on the achievements and the conduct of the organization. There is no direct connection between the school board and the schools, basically, interestingly enough, under 3.0. 3.1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, get at much more specific aspects of that. But I'm assuming that the role of the superintendent is a back and forth role, so that there would be communications and connections coming from the operational organization to the board. I'm not sure that we've seen a lot of those. I'd have to think about that in terms of examples and whatnot. And there may be more room for some inclusion or inclusivity around that, of coming back to the board. And the other thing that we talked about in our group was the dual role of the board in terms of developing the policies and connecting with the community. Now, connecting with the community was an issue that came up at the last meeting, in terms of the board's responsibility and role of finding out what they're feeling, and doing their due diligence as a representative of their community, feet on the ground. And we may not have done a lot of that. And I think that we did, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did talk about Jeannie's activities in communicating as the best way possible, given the situations that were unfolding so rapidly, that there may not have been a way there's no fault here. There may not have been a way to do it differently. It's just that on a feeling level, there may be those that feel that the board was, I think it was stated at the last meeting, the board received information, and that was at the same time the community received that information. So where's the role of the board? Was one question. But in general, I think we understand the nature of 3.0 and the separation between the board's work and the operations, and that it's significantly different than a traditional board approach.
Let me jump in here a little bit. I reached for and got out my green Bible, which is Title 16, and was looking at the duties and powers of school boards and the duties and powers of the electorate and the duties and powers of superintendents. And I'm wondering if those things were interlocked. I don't think they were. They use different language and they have different authorities that are given to each of those people. And I think that probably needs to be looked at just to keep our skirts clean. And one of the things that emerged, which I hadn't really thought of, was that there is a huge gap between the board and the school faculty and staff. And that's probably true of lots of other places too. But here we have something that says these should be separated more, when in some ways we need to constructively get them working together more.
Right.
Totally agree.
Can I comment on the when you were talking, Derek, about information that the board has?
Yes.
So 2.8 is all about that, but the superintendent cannot allow the board to be uninformed or unsupported, not just for data around decision making, but also on any incidental information, which is really what, you know, why you get those long 3 to 4 page memos from me at most board meetings. Or you get interim emails like yesterday when I say there's going to be a media article, so that what is happening in operations, that anything that's unusual, I don't give you a report of what I do from 7:30 in the morning till 6 at night, but you know, anything that stands out that you are aware of. So it is built into 2.8 is my point.
2.8.
Great.
Lori,
Yeah.
can I go back to ours, because Derek did such a great job? It made me think of something else that we talked about.
Not at the moment, because we are behind and I want to hear 4.0, but then maybe if we still have time, maybe I'll let you do that.
Okay, it's real quick.
Okay, so 4.0. So let's do 4.0 first. Yep. And so that would be Barbara and Bonnie C.
I have a really quick clarifying question.
No. Go ahead.
I'm looking at, I pulled up Title 16 when Bill mentioned it, and I found a section for supervisory unions, but that's not us, is it? What do we fall under?
No, we're a school district.
Okay.
There is a supervisory union, but but that's the RNESU.
But we're not a town school district. It's
16 BSA 563.
563, thank you. Okay.
Perfect. Now, Barbara and Bonnie, your turn.
Okay, so as you may have noticed, I've had major technical difficulties, so a lot of our conversation was me saying, oh, I froze again. Oh, I froze again. So
okay.
That was really exciting, and maybe it falls into the, board that is me, person on the board, being unable to achieve my 4.0 commitment, and that I can't do my governing when I can't connect to the internet. But anyway, I don't know, Bonnie, jump in, because we were talking about it when I really got kicked off. But basically 4.0 addresses the limitations of the board and that we are to achieve appropriate results at an appropriate cost, which are specified in ends policies, and we avoid unacceptable actions and situations as prohibited by the executive limitations policies. So it pertains to what we as a board can and can't do and are supposed to do and are not supposed to do.
Okay.
What else do you want me to say? Or what else would you like to know?
So essentially what it's saying is that this is how we govern ourselves, correct?
Yep. And here's why, and yeah. To what purpose, to what end.
Okay.
And we also discovered that Bonnie does not have a fire detector that is chirping. We determined it was Allison.
Excellent.
It was, and it has been taken care of.
There's a long backstory to that, but we have major problems in our house with fire detectors, so I was having a panic attack.
Oh, and so do my parents, actually, and it's connected to ADT. They come with fire trucks. It's like a big ordeal. So anyways, it has been handled, and I apologize for the mistake.
I was just glad it was your house, not mine.
Me too. Me too.
All right, so those are our 4 policies. Does anybody have any questions in regards to any of them? Do they have any? I think what you're going to find is that throughout the rest of the year, we could come back and talk about them in organic terms, but I think what's going to be really helpful is that as we get monitoring reports and as we monitor our own reports, we're going to be able to understand how this works better. And then, Becky, because you asked so nicely, I'll let you say whatever it was you were going to say.
I was just going to say, so when we went back to the COVID discussion last meeting we had, that when we look at policy 2.0, it explains where it says unlawful or unsafe, that Jean knows that she, that's why school closed, and that's why she has this immense plan on how things will come back to be because of that limitation that we have there, because of that policy.
Perfect. All right, does anybody else have anything to say regarding our 4 overarching policies? And did you find this helpful at all?
Got one small comment.
Sure.
Is the use of negative language throughout the superintendent shall not, blah, blah, blah. If the next time this thing gets edited, if we could put this in a more positive, upbeat perspective and say the same thing, I think it would have a nicer tone to it.
Okay.
Can I comment on that, Lori?
Yeah, go for it.
I see Barbara smiling too. That was my first reaction too when I was first learning policy governance, but I now understand that the reason it's in the negative is because it's setting the boundary. If you make it the positive, it's telling you what you can do. You're trying to tell a superintendent what they cannot do. They can do anything within this box, but it has to be within this box, and that's why it's worded the way it is. So if you read it carefully and take it as a whole, then it makes more sense. But being a special educator who believes in positive behavior supports, I had the same initial reaction you did, but that actually would box the person in more. So.
Well, I understand it, but it still isn't pleasant to the eye.
No, but in a like, other than an educational system in businesses and manufacturing and that kind of thing, when you have quality policies and you have policies that run a business, that's the language they use. They use you shall not this and shall not this, and if it shall not, it means you absolutely cannot do it. If it says possible or any of these other words, then you can kind of worm your way around it. But if it says shall not, then it's a definition that you cannot do those actions.
Moses would love it.
Who would love it?
Thought. Moses.
I
was having a similar thought that there's a fairly established precedent.
Thou shalt not.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We do need to finalize our September 23rd professional development plans, which is where we are meeting with Paul Gorski, I think his name is, to talk about equity. And so the question is do we want to involve the public to join our Zoom meeting, which I think we should, but I'm throwing it out there to all of you, and also include the teachers, anybody else I think we should just open it up to the community, which means everybody. But what's your thoughts?
Can you remind people of what he is for that weren't at the retreat?
Yeah, so he and, I have to find it here.
Marceline, his partner, I forget Marceline's last name.
Yeah, I think it was in our minutes from last time, but they're going to speak to equity, and not just like academic equity, but racial equity and
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Equity. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
That's what you had identified.
Yep.
On August 19th.
Right. So what's your pleasure?
A question?
Yep.
Was this scheduled as a faculty professional development activity initially?
No.
Not the topic as you designed it, but yes, these are the people that provided anti-racism equity training to a number of faculty and administration in June.
In June.
Yes.
Right. And then this is a follow-up to our conversations last meeting about wanting some further board professional development around the same topic.
Around that particular topic. And then you also identified LGBTQ, which would be a different presenter. I'd probably have Outright Vermont come and do that.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to find presenters around the topics you identified.
And the question is, do we, so is this open to faculty as a professional development activity at this time?
You mean attending the board meeting as a professional development activity?
No, this presentation.
So the faculty, so yes and no. So over the last several days, as the faculty was doing a number of different professional development activities to reopen schools, this was one of the 2-hour sessions.
Okay.
Not exactly what you're getting, but the same presenter and speaking about equity literacy. And then I had sent you information on them. So
right.
In the information I sent you, there are 3 videos that are on the web, and we focused the teacher's professional development around the second video.
Okay.
And I also believe these guys also spoke at the VSBA thing back in July.
I believe so too.
Okay. So, but
what's his name again?
Paul Gorski?
Gorski?
No, Ki.
Oh, Ki.
Gorski. And my my August 19th Superintendent's Report gives you his website and all the background information on him.
Thank you.
Yep.
There's a link.
So the question.
Do we need a motion about opening it to the public, or is it just a general?
No, this is just to ask you if you want it to be open to the public, and I think it's.
So this is a board meeting, though, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
it is open
has to be
regardless. You
public.
have no reason for it not to be. But do you want to advertise it? Do you want to?
Yes.
Okay, so we have one yes. Angela, do you still have your hand up, or did you ask your question?
I got it.
All right, so I'm going to assume that the answer is yes, you want to advertise this out there, unless somebody says, no, I don't. Okay, not hearing anyone. All right, so we will advertise this probably through social media and Facebook, maybe even in the Reporter. That would be nice. Okay.
I would like to ask that you take back a message that the guy really talk about those ways in which we deny equity. It isn't quite as popular as what we see with racial kinds of things. And for example, school choice segregates. The way that the early education program works has a favoritism towards the more affluent kinds of people. Tracking is a way in which we deny equity to students, the dual enrollment question, and so forth. We really need to look at ourselves in terms of the equity issues.
Okay. Yep. So hopefully this will help us do that.
Bill, I've got the feeling you're saying important things all night, but I've had a terrible time understanding you. I think your microphone might need adjusting.
Yeah, I think it needs to get either closer to your face or I don't know. It keeps cutting out.
Well, it could be me.
That worked.
Okay. So we're going to be moving on to Executive Limitations Monitoring Report, Policy 2.0. Jean had put in our packet monitoring report interpretations for 2.8, which is our communication and support to the board. So this is kind of what Derek was talking about earlier with 3.0 about how she communicates with us and how we communicate with her. Well, actually, how she communicates with us, not with how we communicate with her. But anyway, right. So I think it probably would be the most beneficial if we kind of went through each bullet point and just looked at her interpretation of what it says in our policy, and then if we need to discuss, we discuss. Otherwise, we say it looks good and keep going.
And if I could give you a little context first, you have a draft report in front of you. If you looked at number 1, you have my interpretation, a rationale, observable conditions, and I let you know what evidence might look like. That's just a kind, and I did that on several, but not all of them. Next month, you'll get a full report once interpretation is down, that will actually have all that information. But tonight, you're actually only looking at the interpretation.
That's correct.
That was like to give you a sense of what a report looks like, but your focus tonight is on the interpretation and specifically whether or not the interpretation is a reasonable one.
Right. So if you look in your supplemental docs, the draft of that starts on page 2. And the first one is, so the major policy is the superintendent shall not cause or allow the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. Further, without limiting the scope of the foregoing by this enumeration, the superintendent shall not. And so her first interpretation is right there. I interpret this policy to mean the superintendent shall provide necessary information that allows the board to make fully informed decisions or participate in discussions. Comments, concerns? Derek says it looks good.
So I'm going to actually challenge myself and say, based on your previous conversation, I think it needs to be expanded to say that you're fully informed, to make fully informed decisions or participate in discussions or answer to the best of your ability community concerns as appropriate. Is that
okay? Anybody agree, disagree with that?
Repeat that, Jean.
Respond to community concerns as appropriate.
What does as or appropriate mean?
Well, what I mean is that you're not going to respond and say, yes, I'll reset that password for you. That's not appropriate. But,
right, but that's what
tomorrow there's going to be an article on the Leicester School Lead, and you want to respond. Actually, the as appropriate is something that you guys identified as wanting to talk further about. But how would you respond to somebody who says, I read that article in the newspaper and, is the school dangerous to send my kid? You have enough information to know what our remediation plan is, what it means, et cetera. So that would, to be able to say we are following the state's guidelines and we have a remediation plan that's underway, and students will not have access to the water in the school until we know that it's safe. So see the difference in that's appropriate?
You okay with that, Angela?
Not really, but okay.
Thank you for being so rapidly responsive to our earlier conversation. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Anyone else on that particular interpretation? Okay. So we're going to move on to 1. So the superintendent shall not neglect to submit monitoring data required by the board. See policy 3.4 on monitoring superintendent performance in a timely, accurate, and understandable fashion, directly addressing the provisions of board policies being monitored. Her interpretation is below. Says that the superintendent will provide completed monitoring reports according to the work plan and on time with a reasonable allowance for emergencies. Reports will include evidence to be presented in a manner acceptable to the board.
The reasonable allowance for emergencies arose with COVID.
Yep.
Because we got off schedule last year.
Comments, concerns, reasonable, not reasonable?
No. Question?
Okay.
No, it'll come later with information.
Okay. So is the interpretation, as far as you're concerned, Derek, reasonable? And are you more concerned about the information she's going to provide next month with the actual monitoring report? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, my question will be answered later at the
okay,
with the other information.
Okay. Kevin, did you have a question? No? Okay. Anyone else have a question? regarding this interpretation? So your silence tells me that you're okay with this interpretation as it reads. Okay, great. Number 2, allow the board to be, means the superintendent will not allow the board to be unaware of any actual or anticipated non-compliance with any ends or executive limitations policy, regardless of the board's monitoring schedule. Her interpretation says that the monitoring reports and interim informational communications will truthfully and accurately alert the board to any condition of current noncompliance or condition of noncompliance considered likely in the future, and should include a plan for incremental movement toward compliance in a reasonable time frame.
And this is where the last time I did this report, well, I don't know if this is the exact one, but Becky's example of being out of compliance with confidentiality would fall under this. I actually reported it under treatment of students and parents, but this also says I had to tell you. Or at the end of the year, when I did the interim COVID report, I needed to tell you that our budget was blown up in the spring. Now, we managed to control the budget very tightly despite all of the unknowns, and we came in with a surplus, but I needed to give you that heads up early on that what we had as a plan for financial spending was not going to be met the way we had written it. So that's where those things fall in here, making sure you have that information.
One of the things that's interesting about the superintendent shall inform us is if she didn't, how would we know?
Well, that's the thing, but you would end up knowing. And that's where if you have a superintendent who is not doing their job, this is actually something that it's going to start cropping up. I mean, you might get away with once or twice not saying something, but.
I was going to say, Jean, how would we know if you didn't highlight that you were not in compliance or something was not in compliance? How, like literally, how would we know?
Again, I think it would, you may not know that exact one, Angela. Like you may not have known that we were out of compliance with FERPA confidentiality unless you happen to be a parent or a neighbor of a parent who experienced it. But the other example, the budget thing, come July, you would have said, hey, what's going on? I mean, at some point you would have said, hey, what's going on with our budget? And you would have asked for that. So the concept is maybe you don't know every little thing that a superintendent chooses not to tell you, but if that's a pattern of behavior in a superintendent, this is a policy that you go back to and say, you're out of compliance. And it does turn up.
And I also think it's better that it's in here only because it allows, first of all, if something does come up, she's giving us a heads up before it becomes a huge issue for us. We can get ahead of it. That's really what this boils down to, is that this allows the board more time to pivot if we need to, or instead of all of a sudden crash coursing like the Titanic into an iceberg that they didn't know was out there. So.
Yeah, I don't have an issue of it being there. I think it's great. I think maybe it comes into the monitoring, like how do we put a monitoring thing in place that will highlight that there was non-conformances and we weren't aware of it.
That's a great question, Angela. And we haven't yet gone past the written monitoring reports, but there are other ways you can monitor. You can do, I don't remember the terms. I don't know.
Direct inspection.
Yeah, direct inspection. So you can have a sense, maybe from community or faculty morale, you can have a sense that something's not being followed. And you can, as a board as a whole, not a single person, but the board as a whole can put a direct inspection of any particular policy on here where you would come in. Direct inspection might be that you're doing a focus group or you're coming in and looking at finance documents yourself or whatever it is, but you don't have to just rely on what the superintendent told you.
Right. You can also ask for an outside auditor or an outside way of, having somebody else come in and look at it and give you an idea of what's going on. So we don't have to wait for just monitoring reports from Jean or just rely on those.
On auditors, do we have this annually, and does the report go directly to the board?
Are you talking financial audit?
Yeah.
That it does happen. We do have it annually and it does go to the board.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so is there anything, so is that interpretation reasonable to you guys?
Yes, I think it's in keeping with the larger aspects of policy governance that we're trying to move everybody towards proactive behavior rather than reactive behavior. So.
Right. Yep. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to be proactive rather than reactive. Usually almost always ends better that way. Okay. So I'm going to move on to number 3, which is the superintendent will not neglect to submit unbiased decision information required periodically by the board or let the board be unaware of relevant trends. Her interpretation is that she will provide factual information for board decisions and provide information to the board regarding any trends affecting its work towards the global ends of the district. What's your feeling? Good? Any questions? Does this make sense?
The interpretation?
Yeah, the interpretation itself.
Could you restate that?
So I want to make sure that the interpretation makes sense in regard to the to what the policy states. So does it make sense that her interpretation hits the nail on the head for number 3?
And interestingly for me, I almost wonder if the rationale doesn't do a better job of the interpretation paragraph here, but they say the same thing. The rationale just kind of expands further.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what this means is that she's going to provide us with information regardless of whether it makes her look bad or good or whether she thinks that we're going to be upset about it. But she will provide us with the information to allow us to make good decisions instead of hiding things from us so that we don't know.
Or relevant trends and information that's related to it that that may not be what we want
right.
to have happen, but it's coming.
Right, exactly. We need to be aware of that stuff.
Like
absolutely.
Currently at finance, world of finance.
Yes. Okay, any other questions for that one? Okay. Number 4, that the superintendent will not let the board be unaware of any significant incidental information it requires, including anticipated media coverage, threatened or pending lawsuits, and material internal and external changes. I'm assuming that means, well, yeah, okay. So she interprets incidental information to be the information which is agreed upon by the board and the superintendent. I'm not sure what that means. Anyway, providing the board with current incidental information ensures that the board is not uninformed or surprised when unusual events occur and will be informed as soon as reasonably possible. It also includes anticipated media coverage, which is not recurring, and information the board clarifies in advance that the entire board needs. I interpret threatened or pending lawsuits to be legal actions that have been taken against or threatened against the board to the extent that the board has received notification and is not unduly compromised in its quasi-judicial role.
So as you read that, I would restate the beginning to say, I interpret incidental information as current incidents. It uses the word incidental information again.
I think I'd just take that first sentence right out because obviously, I mean, incidental information is just, I think you're providing the board with current incidental information, ensuring that the board's not uninformed. The first sentence, I mean,
yeah,
I'm not sure what we would have agreed upon by the board and the superintendent.
Yeah, this is where, Bill, you asked why I call it incidental information in the superintendent report. This is where, this policy is where I get that language. But actually, as opposed to incidental information, it's, what's the terminology I'm using now? I can't, I'll look up that terminology and I'll define it that way. Okay. And then I would also argue, and I'm critiquing myself, so I'm helping you guys out here. I don't define in here material, internal, and external changes. So I need to do that for you.
Yep. Anything else for this one from anyone?
Yeah, I just want to agree that the term incidental information is confusing. I took it to mean, I guess, more common usage of it's relatively minor and unimportant information.
Yeah, but it might not be minor and unimportant.
Might not be minor.
I think information about incidents might be clearer.
Yeah, yeah. I'll do better on that.
Okay. Anything else for that interpretation? Okay. Number 5, the superintendent will not let the board be unaware if, in the superintendent's opinion, the board is not in compliance with its own policies on governance process and board management delegation, which is 3.0 and 4.0, particularly in the case of board behavior that is detrimental to the work relationship between the board and the superintendent. She says she has a responsibility to bring matters to the board's attention that, in her opinion, indicates board behavior which is out of compliance with board policies, whether an individual matter or the infraction is of the entire board. It shall be brought to the attention of the board as a whole. So I would assume that that's something like if I started going in every day and pestering Brenda or the office wanting this, that, and the other thing, and then you would report me to the board.
Right.
Because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
If the board starts going down a rabbit hole, this actually says that you have directed me to let you know if that happens.
Right.
So you're going to hold us accountable if we get out of line?
Kind of. I have to notify you. It's up to you to hold yourself accountable, though.
I see. So you're going to notify us.
I won't send you to the superintendent's office.
But that you'll notify us that we're out of compliance.
Yeah, that you're not following your own policies. Right.
Yeah. Unless we notify ourselves. If we know something's going on, Derek, then we can notify ourselves and be like, hey, you're out of compliance with our own policies.
Right. We've done that.
We have. So yes. Okay. Other questions about this? I'm not trying to be fast, but it is 7:43 and we're very far behind tonight.
Go.
Okay. Number 6. Superintendent shall not present information in unnecessarily complex or lengthy form or in a form that fails to differentiate among information of 3 types: monitoring, decision preparation, and incidental.
Informational. That's what I used it as, informational.
Okay.
So in my monitoring reports, in my superintendent updates, I identify those 3 things.
Okay. Let's see. So she shall submit all verbal and written reports information in a manner which is short, concise, and to the point, distinguishing between reports to be used to oversee operations, monitoring, to make decisions, or solely for informational purposes.
No argument over short and concise?
No, well, this report's really long. I'm not so sure how short and concise it is, but anyway.
Exactly.
Okay. Derek gave me the thumbs up. Everybody else okay on that one? Okay. Number 7, the superintendent shall not allow the board to be deprived of a workable mechanism for official board, officer, or committee communications. Superintendent shall provide access to available tools to communicate effectively among board members, board committees, the community, staff, and the superintendent. These tools will include access to district websites, email, and the internet in general. She also interprets this to mean the superintendent will provide systems which will facilitate a reliable flow of information between the board or board chair and superintendent.
So evidence then would speak to the email system, the Google apps, the website, the Let's Talk.
Right.
As examples.
Yep. Everybody okay with that one? Okay. Number 8. Superintendent shall not deal with the board in a way that favors or privileges certain board members over others, except when responding to officers or committees duly charged by the board. Means that she will provide information to all board members so all are equally informed. She also interprets this to mean the request or direction of one board member shall not be treated as a directive to the entire district, but rather redirected to the board as a whole for consideration through the board chair. What's your thought process? Reasonable? Okay. I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to assume you're saying it's okay.
Okay.
Number 9, the superintendent shall not allow the board to do its work without the necessary items on its consent agenda. Necessary items are those decisions delegated to the superintendent, yet required by law, regulation, or contract to be board approved, along with applicable monitoring information. So the superintendent shall advise and include consent agenda items that fulfill the board's legal, contractual, and regulatory responsibilities. It also means that the superintendent complies with all of the board's executive limitations. She is authorized to proceed or take action on operational decisions without prior approval from the board. Okay. Not hearing anything? Okay. Number 10. How long is this thing? Sorry.
I think you're on the last one. You've got to be.
12.
Got to be getting close. I see
Wow.
2 more at least. Number 10. The superintendent shall not allow the boards to be unaware of common concerns, needs, or issues and opportunities to collaborate. So her interpretation means that the superintendent will inform the board of information or concerns that are brought forward by community members, as well as superintendent concerns, needs, or issues, or of opportunities to collaborate with the community or other partners of education.
I don't have any problem with the interpretation, but the number 10, the part in bold,
Yep.
is very confusing. Maybe it should be include the word public, common public concerns. I'm not sure what a common concern is.
Oh, what common means? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be something, as far as number 10 is concerned, that would be something that we would have to take up as a board to change that. But at this point, we just need to determine if her interpretation makes sense. But you're right. If common concerns doesn't really express what we think it needs to, then we can always make that a little sharper.
Okay.
And do we put that on the next agenda?
Actually, we could talk about it when we actually do her monitoring report, I assume. Would that be right, Jean?
Yeah.
So when she actually gives us the evidence, depending on the evidence, we might want to say that we need to make 2.8.10 a little bit sharper because it's not as clear as we'd like it to be.
We can't do that now?
Well, it's 7:49, and I think we could do it now, I suppose. If
you could do
all
it
come together.
if you need to know though that if you change it, my monitoring report is still going to be based on the way it's worded now, because to change anything in here, it's a policy. It's a 2-meeting process.
Yeah.
So you might want to think about it and put it forward at when we go through the whole monitoring report so that it's changed for the next time around.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to remember.
I'm going to put it on the agenda. I will have it on the agenda to bring up when we talk about policies next month. Is that okay?
Okay, fine. Thank you.
We won't be doing it on we won't be doing it on September 23rd, but we will be doing it in our first October meeting.
Okay.
Derek had his finger up.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, go ahead.
On the same number 10,
Yep.
I'd like some clarity, not now, but on the opportunities to collaborate with the community and how broad that kind of information might be. It's a little different than the other concern-based comments, needs, or issues.
Sure.
This is a more positive thing, and it's certainly much more germane to the board's role in connecting with the community. So what's going on in terms of collaborations?
Okay, great. So we'll find out more about that next month when she brings it back to us. Any other things on 2.8.10? Okay. Number 11, the superintendent shall not allow the board to be uninformed in a timely manner of all significant gifts. So what's the last significant gift you got, Jean, that you didn't tell us about?
Well, not significant. We had a less than significant, but still absolutely delightful gift from a gentleman who graduated eons ago, who wrote this lovely letter and I think sent $1,000 to the board.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was so lovely. But no, there haven't. So here you go. I mean, I interpreted significant gift as 5,000 or more. And I based that by talking to Brenda about what the best financial practices are for what would significant be.
Okay. Anybody got any thoughts or ideas about that?
I also, it's more a question about the policy itself. Significant gifts to whom? It's my question.
Oh.
I'm reading this that somebody can fork over $4,900 to the superintendent as a bribe, and we don't need to hear about it.
Yeah, okay. I agree. And just a note from my perspective, I think 5,000 is still high. I think in the way that people can actually give gifts to try and sway people's decisions is getting higher and higher of a problem. And I think if there should be a actual policy that says no gifts are allowed, period.
Well, why don't we come back and talk about that? I've added that to my list, so we can talk about that as well. So if you don't think your interpretation is rational, I understand where the 5,000 came up from Brenda, because that is a financial number usually that we would consider significant, or what we would also call material. That's usually a number in finance. And because we are a $22 million district, $5,000 is not significant in that total $22 million budget. However, I'll get with you, Derek. You can go next. In this regard, I would probably think that any gift probably over actually, I think the number needs to be a lot less, because we just don't know who it's coming from or why. And if the gentleman who gave you the $1,000 with the nice letter was saying, please, distribute this into our student accounts, we'd all be like, sure, go ahead, do that. But yeah. So anyway, so Derek, you had something to say.
Yeah, question. Did we have, prior to policy governance, did we have policy or procedure language about accepting gifts, and does that still stand?
Yep. We do, but I think right now you're mixing two different things. So,
okay.
And it goes back to what Kevin said. You may want to modify the policy on. This is about significant, and I don't even put it in there, but significant gifts to the board. We already have a policy about any gifts that any employee can receive.
Okay.
And I think it's $100 or $150 there. So in other words, if you go to a conference and they're handing out little goodies, those little chi-chi things.
Yeah.
Those are gifts. And that's why we don't say no gifts, because that would be difficult. But the limit is like $100 or $150, but it's in a separate area.
So this is gifts to the board, not gifts to you.
Yeah. So I'll clarify the reasonable interpretation that this is gifts to the board. And then you can decide if you want to put that language in the policy itself.
Yeah. Okay. So I've added that.
Yeah, I think it behooves us to do that.
Yeah.
Me too.
I wouldn't want even $100 coming to the board.
Okay.
It just doesn't feel right to me.
Or the board or the district.
Yes, either or.
Well, it depends. I don't know that we want to say nothing,
That's
like
right.
if an Ely fund came to, or a Burnett fund came to the district, somebody passes away and leaves us you know, $10
That's
million
right.
in a fund. I don't think we want to say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't want that.
But that's to the district. See, we have
but that's to the, I would consider
back
that.
Back to Kevin's point. We need to
Yes.
clarify this because
Okay.
it's not clear, because gifts can mean anything, and we could talk about this for another 20 minutes.
Right.
Yes, we could. So I've added it to my list. We're going to talk about 2.8.810, 2.8.11. That's on the October agenda. So here's the last one for the evening, is 2.8.12, which says the superintendent will not allow the board to be unsupported and uninformed in its role as a quasi-judicial hearing body. So the interpretation means that she shall ensure the board has timely information and is adequately prepared for and maintains its objectivity when working as a quasi-judicial hearing body. And we have talked about this in the past as far as our quasi-judicial hearing issues. If something comes before the board, we cannot necessarily know lots of things about a personnel issue that's going on, because we would be violating their ability to come to us as the quasi-judicial board and hear Jean's side and hear theirs and be unbiased. Okay, any questions about that? Not hearing anybody? Good interpretation? Okay, so there you go, Jean. You're ready to go to the next step. And we will talk about the other two, about changing those two policies possibly in October.
Okie doke.
Okay.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, as much as I hate to do this, I think we're going to skip our monitoring report 4.2 and move that to October as well. Does anybody have any issues with that? We'll table it and move it.
Which one?
The under board management delegation policy 3.0, we were going to do our own monitoring report for policy 4.2. I mean, we can stay, and you can make the motion that we stay beyond our 2 hours and do this.
It was just a question.
Okay, so we will move that to October. All right, governance process, affirm board priorities. So the list on our agenda is all of the priorities that you guys, that we all talked about at our August 19th board retreat. I reviewed this compared to the list that I had made when we actually were in our meeting, and I want to make sure that they all agree with what you thought as well. And they were equity professional development for the board, which we're going to be doing on the 23rd. Monitoring of policies, which we started to do now. Policy governance professional development and board meetings, which we did some tonight. Continue talking middle school model. We haven't done that this evening, but we do need to keep it on our horizons. And we also need to ensure that our board members participate and have a lively discussion, which I think we also did that well this evening. Am I missing anything? Do we need to add anything else here? Did we forget anything?
I'd just like to say, I think we're spending too much time talking about our own process.
Okay.
I'd like to get more to the education of children in future meetings.
As far as what, well, so we can always have presentations by like Christine Hubert, who can come forward and tell us, you know, how they're doing literacy in grades K through 12. Is that what kind of what you're asking?
I'm not really interested in presentations so much unless we request them for information. I just don't, I just like to be hearing more about what we're planning. You know, we supposedly we're planning for 2034, we heard last time, and we haven't gotten to that. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about what we see as future of this district rather than how we're running our meetings.
Future district. Okay. All right, signing of orders.
Oh, we do have somebody fully staffing the office now, and I didn't know if the board wanted to take back the signing of orders or if you want to leave it as is and you have them online. Totally your call. But you had asked me when we went into this and you delegated it to Jess and me, I said I would bring it up when the office is available.
I think if the office is open that we should take it back, but I will leave it up to the rest of the board to say yay or nay to that.
I agree.
Okay.
Take it back. Take it back.
I agree.
All right, we're taking it back. So we'll be notified somehow that orders are ready, and then we just need 2 signatures, right?
That's what you set up, yes.
Okay, great. We need to appoint a rep for our October VSBT and VHI annual meeting.
And that meeting was announced today, Lori, as it's a virtual meeting on October, see, the 23rd or 28th.
Okay. I think I saw it in my email,
It's the
actually.
29th.
Okay.
Maybe
Thank
29th
you.
at 5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Yep, 29th. Okay.
Is that what did you say? 5 p.m.
Yep, 5 p.m. So if somebody is going to attend that, we can appoint you as our rep. Otherwise, I know I'll be going to that meeting, but someone else wants to stand in as our rep, you're more than welcome to do so.
I'm sure I'll be there with you, Lori.
Okay, cool.
Bill,
But you can be the rep.
That's when a resolution comes forward.
What was that, Bill? I'm sorry.
Don't we have a resolution at that business meeting, or is that a different meeting?
Oh, the resolution that we
You're
put forth
muted.
to them? Yeah, we'll hear that at the annual business meeting.
Yes.
We don't have to present it. They already have it. They'll
Right,
present
but you'll vote on it.
Yeah,
Right.
we'll vote on it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody wants to step forward and be the representative, I'm happy. Derek, is that you? Are you saying you want to do it? Oh, okay. I saw you raise your hand. So I'm happy to stand in.
I'm trying to raise my hand, but I think either it's not working or
Oh, I see it now. I didn't look.
Okay.
Sorry, nobody was really using it tonight.
Okay, sorry. I just have been so out of the loop. I'm not out of the loop, but disconnected in so many ways. Wasn't sure if it was getting through. I wanted to just speak briefly about Kevin's concern that we're not spending enough time talking about kids and we're talking about policy. And I wanted to just circle back to the fact that there has been some pushback against the policy governance, which I think led to this deep dive today to help newer board members understand why we adopted policy governance, how it operates, and how it actually does guide us in our greater mission. So this discussion is specifically so that we can all understand how our governing model enables us to address the needs of kids. So that's how we do it, and that's why we're talking about it this way.
Okay. Right. Well, and that's true. I mean, as far as the operational education of kids, that is under Jean's purview. So, and the monitoring reports are supposed to prove to us that she is educating our kids and making sure that they're becoming model citizens, hopefully. Okay, so we still need a rep. Are you just appointing? So someone needs to make a motion.
I can be a rep if I'm going anyways. I was
all right. Then
I was joking that you could do it.
Before Angela said that, Bill offered to.
All right, go ahead, Bill.
All right, so I'll make the motion that Bill Mathis be our rep for the VHI VSBT annual meeting on October 29th. Angela, you want a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm seeing everybody raising their hands. Bill, you want to raise your hand in support of yourself? Great, excellent. Okay, Bill, you are our rep for October, or for the VSBT VHI meeting. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent's Report. Do we have to do a quick motion to go beyond our 2-hour limit?
You should. You don't have too much more to go, though.
I know, there's only a couple things left. So,
So moved.
Barbara, yep. Are you making the motion? Yes. Excellent. We should only need 20 minutes tops. Can I get someone to second her motion?
Second.
Okay. All those that approve, say aye or raise your hand. Okay, perfect. Go for it. Superintendent's report.
Okay, I'm going to talk for 2 hours. No, I'm just kidding.
I gave you 20 minutes.
No, you didn't even give me that. Talk for 2. So teachers are back. Staff is back since last Tuesday. And today I took the day to visit each one of the schools. I don't think that's something I can do when kids return. I don't think that's wise. So I wanted to see what it looked like and talk to teachers. And I have to say that although there is a lot of anxiety in the schools because there's just so much unknown, there's also a great deal of positive energy, and people are kind of excited to be back. Nervous because we don't really know, what's to come, what this year is going to look like, what's going to turn up. But people are excited to be back, and it was a pleasure to walk around the schools and to see the seats that are 6 feet apart, but the rooms look very welcoming, and preparing bags for kids to have their books and things at home. So we are opening on Tuesday. Today I sent out the first meal ordering survey. Yesterday we got word that the U.S. government has extended the free lunch for all kids to December. So that's wonderful. So today I put that information in the survey that lunch and breakfast is free for all kids. However, you must order it. So if you have an opportunity to, get that word out as well, this year we need to have the order by Friday the week before. So today I sent the menu, I sent the survey. Within the first 15 minutes, we had 65 responses. So I think people are, most people are getting it and expecting it. And we're not able to deliver lunches this year because unlike spring, we're using our buses to transport students morning, noon, and after school. So we're not able to deliver. So parents can either pick up the meal, which would be a breakfast and lunch, at the school that they designate, or if they have a child who's in school, either because they're K2 or because they're getting in-school support, they can bring it home. So we're trying, and we also will make it available at any school that you say. So if you're a parent who maybe works in Rutland and it's easier to get to Pittsford, even though your child's in Neshabie, that's fine. We'll make that work. So that's about it. We are still looking for custodians, and we are still looking for about 2 or 3 of the floating subs. And if you know any nurses who want to go on just a sub list, we would really appreciate that. That's it.
Thank you. So I do have one question about school lunches because I looked at the menus today. Are they going to ever get beyond sandwiches?
It's really difficult to say. At the moment, we're starting simple. But I think as the year goes on and we bring more kids into the building, there'll be, yes, we'd like to get beyond sandwiches.
Okay, cool. Great. So any other questions? Thank you for your information about the Leicester test results and the remediation that you're doing there. And that's great. Any questions for Jean on incidental information? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands at me. Perfect. Consent agenda. Before I start that, does anybody want to pull anything off of the consent agenda? Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Perfect.
Well,
All those in...
Lori, there's just one thing that Rebecca brought to our attention is that she was left off the in attendance at the August 19th meeting. So I would like a motion to read to approve the consent agenda, adding Rebecca as attending the August 19th meeting.
Perfect. Are everybody okay with a friendly amendment on that? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. All those in favor of the consent agenda with adding Becky Bertrand to our August 19th meeting in the minutes, please signify by saying aye, or the green little button on the side there would be perfect, or no if you don't approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And the ayes have it. All right, we have a consent agenda. There is nothing under consideration for global ends monitoring at this point. Our next board meeting will not be the 16th. It will be Wednesday, September 23rd, 6 p.m. online. We are doing that so we can have Paul Gorski and his associate talk to us about equity. We will advertise that in as many ways as we can. So hopefully we'll have lots of people on the call with us. And we will adjourn if everybody's okay to do that at 8:10 unless they have something to bring forth before the board.
You want to do an evaluation?
I guess. Sure, we can do an evaluation. Do we have, was there one? I didn't see one in the packet, but maybe I missed it.
Couldn't tell you. I didn't print it if it was there.
I think it was.
While I'm looking for that, the other thing I had said at the last meeting was that if you know of any fundraising or anything that's happening in the schools and you want to make sure that people know about it, please mention it during the board meeting. And so, oh, we do have one. Okay. So I want to reiterate that Walking Stick Theater is still fundraising for their Scotland trip. In the month of August, they made over $2,500 between their bottle drive and their concession stand at the drive-in, along with their 50-50 raffle. So their bottle drive will continue through the month of September because Jamie Quinville said if we could raise $1,000 returning bottles to her, that she would allow us to go through September. So continue to send your bottles back to Union Street or get a hold of a theater member so that they can take them back for you. And they are also continuing to sell concessions at the drive-in on Friday and Saturday nights, and also Sunday night this week because it's a holiday weekend. So we hope to see you in the drive-in.
Lori, could I have
anything going on? Yeah.
Could I should have said this already, but I can give you an update on the front entrance to Otter Valley.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, so it's coming along well. We had hoped that by Monday it would be fully open and we'd be going through the punch list, but that's not quite going to happen. But basically, there's very little left to do. By Monday, we'll be doing the flooring in the new section and starting to work on finishing it on the outside so that we got the blue up there in the Otter Valley. I mean, it's very far along. So we think it'll be another week, 2 weeks from today, roughly, before we can say it's fully open, but it's very close.
So how do you plan on having kids enter the building?
There's a whole variety of ways. Primarily, the cars will come in through the cafeteria or the middle school entrance, and then the buses are going to different entrances around the building. So they have a complex plan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Once the floor is down, we can actually walk through.
Cool. Okay, so going back to Jean's wanting us to do a board meeting self-evaluation, I am doing the one that was in the back of the supplemental information. And so if you want to follow along, it says, we provided strategic leadership by focusing on ends, always, most of the time, some of the time, rarely, never.
In this case, it's always, I would say.
I think we did always tonight, only because we definitely focused on our policies. But I'll leave it to you guys. What do you think? 4? Okay. We obtain and or consider ownership input. I think we're constantly thinking about our owners when we're talking about, we did that a lot tonight about our community, how we communicate with them, how we can collaborate with them. Fist of 5. 3, 4, 5. What's everybody think? Okay. We encourage diversity of viewpoints. Always, most of the time, some of the time, rarely. What do you think, Greg? I don't see you telling me anything. Kevin, Angela? Barbara, what do you think? Bonnie? Okay. Barry? Okay. We were proactive and future focused. Okay.
So I would note that I see a 4, 4, a 0, and a 5.
Yep.
Angela's dog isn't telling us a thing.
Nope. We limited our decisions to items that related to the board's governance job. Okay. I'm not seeing everybody give me numbers. Everybody do it one more time, please. Okay. And decisions were made collectively. Okay. Anybody else want to join in there? Okay. Okay, thank you for that. So if anybody wants to make the motion to adjourn at 8:17, that would be great.
So moved.
Okay, second?
Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, if you leave the meeting, then that meant you agree. Thanks so much.
Everybody.
Have a good night.